Hi, I'm Suzanne Turner, and welcome to a podcast delving into the personal narratives within the clinical research industry. Through candid interviews, we'll learn about the personal journeys and motivations of individuals who have chosen this profession, what I like to call their why. This podcast is not just for industry insiders. It's for everyone curious about the human side of healthcare. Beyond the industry's negative reputation, we'll shed light on the dedicated professionals behind clinical trials. Join us as we uncover the heart and passion of those working tirelessly behind the scenes in clinical research. Welcome to Heart of the Trial. Hello, lovely listeners. I'm your host, Suzanne Turner, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to another episode of Heart of the Trial, where we uncover the human stories within clinical research and shed a positive light on the pharmaceutical industry. Today, we are talking about an important piece of clinical trials, and that is how our bodies and the drugs interact with each other. Our guest today is Dr. Emily Cicali, whose expertise lies in pharmacogenomics, or PGX. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
I am so excited to have you, as I've told you many times. I hope our listeners are as excited because this is such a fascinating topic to me. So why don't you start by telling us what pharmacogenomics is?
Absolutely. So pharmacogenomics is a DNA test, and it's not looking at all of your DNA because your DNA can look at what eye color you have, what hair color you have. But pharmacogenomics is looking at one specific part of your DNA that shows how you produce certain proteins in the liver. And these are called drug metabolizing enzymes. So the DNA that we look at with the pharmacogenomics test is looking to see how fast or slow someone's drug metabolizing enzymes might be, and then therefore what their response to certain medications are. So we're not looking at all the whole DNA because there's lots of interesting things within the DNA, but just looking at a small piece there that can really tell us if someone has a genetic variation, which might tell us that someone has really fast drug metabolizing enzymes. And then that means that they might get rid of medications more quickly than the average person. And then that drug might not work well for them.
That's amazing. And why would that be important? Why would it be important for us to actually know that about ourselves, possibly even before starting a drug?
Great question. If you know that information before starting a drug, you might have a better response to medications. So, for example, with medications used to medications prescribed to treat depression and/or anxiety, these medications can take up to 4 to 6 weeks to start working, and often are prescribed in a trial and error approach. So, your doctor will prescribe one, bring you back in about 6 weeks. Either if it's still not working, increase the dose or change to an alternative medication. And if you have that pharmacogenomic test up front, then you might be able to skip some of that trial and error prescribing because we would recommend starting with drug X right away instead of the usual where your doctor might not prescribe that drug until the third drug that you're trying.
That is amazing. And it would save a lot of people a lot of time and pain and effort to know that in advance. So
Absolutely.
I'm really curious, like, how you got into this, because this is a very fascinating subject. So how did you get to this point? Where did you start? What path did you take? I'd love to hear that.
Sure. So, I always had an interest in genetics. I just thought the topic was very interesting. And I always also wanted to be a pharmacist. I wanted to do something within the healthcare space. And once I started pharmacy school is when I first learned about this field. And that was kind of it for me. I was like, oh my goodness, I can combine my passion of being a pharmacist with my very strong interest in genetics. Like that was kind of it for me. And that's not typical within pharmacy school or like within the realm of the pharmacy profession. There's opportunity to specialize in a variety of areas. And often people don't choose their specialty until the last year of pharmacy school, or even after doing like a year or so of training. So I was pretty early on in my discovery of specialization. I think it was like my first year of pharmacy school. So I knew right away within pharmacy school that that's where I wanted to go. And I put pretty much all my efforts as I trained to become a pharmacist. And then my postgraduate training was all within the field of pharmacogenomics.
Oh, that is crazy. And now you do multiple things related to this, right? Because you're actually a professor, correct?
Yes, I'm a clinical associate professor at the University of Florida College of Pharmacy. And being on faculty, I have the opportunity to not only teach pharmacy students and training the next generation of pharmacists, but as a part of my job, I get to have a clinical practice as well as participate in research.
That is so amazing. And then you specialize though in specifically the I know I'm going to mess this up so many times. Pharmacogenomics,
Yes.
because you actually have a business like specifically related to this, correct?
So I run a clinical service called MyRx. It's through the College of Pharmacy. So it's the University of Florida College of Pharmacy clinical practice site for pharmacogenomics. But it was really my passion area, along with one of my previous mentors, Dr. Kristen Wiesenen. Her and I really ran all of the clinical kind of day to day here at University of Florida. And it was really our passion to help people beyond just patients here at UF Health be able to get pharmacogenomic testing and interpretation. I would get calls from several different people just, can you help me? I'm so frustrated with my medications. And I knew that we needed a way to get this test and interpretation and pharmacist consultation more accessible to patients. So yes, it is a small business venture, but it is my clinical practice site as faculty here.
Amazing.
And it was really my passion. And I'm just really fortunate that to the college that allows me to create this opportunity for people.
So that means like the everyday person like myself, for example, could work with you to figure out my pharmacogenomics so that I knew what I metabolize faster and what I probably shouldn't be on, or if I do, I might need a higher dose of, et cetera. So they could just work with you to figure this out.
Absolutely. Yes, that is correct. So people, patients, anyone who, well, really our service is only offered right now to anyone who lives in the states of Florida and New Jersey, because that's where I'm licensed as a pharmacist, but we are working to expand to other
Oh, that's so
states.
cool.
But yes, patients who live in those two states can reach out, and we would either work with the individual's provider to get pharmacogenomic testing, or we work with an internal provider to facilitate testing. And then the patients work directly with our pharmacist team, where we meet via Zoom. We have an educational visit directly with the patients, so that way they can understand what these results mean. It's a one-time test, so your DNA doesn't change. So these
Mm-hmm.
results can be used over and over again. So one of the areas that we're really passionate about at MyRx is really empowering the patient to understand these results and know what medications could be impacted in the future. There, so
Yeah.
often patients don't necessarily stick with the same primary care provider
Mm-hmm.
or go from one healthcare system to another. So if they can at least remember, oh, someone told me something about this medication. There's something that something to trigger that patient's memory to then say,
Yeah.
hey, can you take a look at these results? Or just making that provider aware that they have these results prior to them prescribing medications can be life changing for patients.
Well, and you said something there I want to grab onto is you mentioned other drugs. So this is also helps them with like I take multiple items. So knowing that it's okay for me to take drug A with drug B and that they're not gonna mess with each other or cancel each other out or something, right?
Yeah, so this test can impact several different medication areas. So someone might get the test to help their depression medication, for example. And then down the line, they might need some type of pain medication prescribed. So these results can be used over and over again for different areas. But yes, there could also be interactions. So as pharmacists, we're always looking for drug
Yeah.
interactions, just looking for just your normal drug to drug or one to one type of interactions. But knowing your genetics also can help play into another layer of understanding potential interactions. So, for example, depression medications commonly cause an interaction to take out the drug metabolizing enzyme that is needed for pain relief. So we know information about your DNA and depression medications. We know information about DNA and your pain medications. And then if you're taking all three, we can further interpret or further provide additional information about all of that information.
That is crazy. This is so cool. And the reason this fascinates me is because obviously when we're doing clinical research, there are different types. The kind that I feel a lot of individuals think about is like an ingestible, like pills that they take. And when you're running these clinical trials, this is like exactly what we're testing, right? We want to see how your body reacts to the drug, if the drug does what we expect it to do. And from what I recall of us talking a little bit, you've had a little bit of experience in clinical research. And when you were doing that, were you able to take this skill and use that to help you know if patients like would actually be positively impacted by the drug?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of different stages of clinical research, as you know.
Right.
So
Right.
there are definitely trials going on to more at the drug discovery end to determine is there a genetic variation that should be that the population should be aware of or adjust the dosing of medication during that approval process or beyond when that drug goes to market. My experience with clinical research is more within pragmatic clinical trials. So at University of Florida College of Pharmacy, we're able to do partake in several different pragmatic clinical trials. Specifically, we've been a part of the Ignite networks, Ignite One and
Mm.
Ignite Two, which are multi-site, and everyone in this most recent Ignite 2, all the different sites were conducting the same clinical trial at our different institutions. And during those trials, what was studied was the standard of care versus a pharmacogenetic guided approach, and really trying to
Ah.
see how we can improve patient reported outcomes by having these test results available.
Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
intervention in these cases was this clinical test and clinical intervention. So my role was really helping to facilitate the interpretation of these results, writing consult notes directly to the provider to say, this is what this test result means. These are your recommendations. Um, the trials were pragmatic, so the providers didn't necessarily have to follow those recommendations, but we provided them, we interpreted the results, we accounted for drug-drug interactions on top of the results.
Right,
We
right.
also provided the infrastructure within our own clinical sites. So each different clinical site had different infrastructure to have the recommendations pop up in real time to those providers as well.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's been my experience is implementing this test. It's a clinical test. It's available to implement into your daily life, but my experience has also been trying to research it and really showcase that it can improve patients' lives by using this test to prescribe medications.
That is so cool. And I mean, obviously, keeping within confidentiality, are you able to tell us, like, if you were seeing a positive results from using that method?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would if I could so far. So the Ignite 2 trials have just wrapped up. So we are currently doing some data analysis yet. So I
Ooh,
don't even
yep.
know personally yet those
Okay.
results. But we are going to be able to see results for acute pain, chronic pain as well as depression and anxiety.
Oh, wow.
And these larger studies were based on smaller pilots that were done. So we
Okay.
do have evidence for chronic pain and acute pain that there was improvement. So we did
Oh,
see
wow.
our early smaller pilots were done on one site. So at University of Florida, we did a single site. So that was part of Ignite One Network, was all the different sites got to do different types of research projects. So they were smaller in scale and more pilot studies, but we did see reduction in pain, patient-reported pain outcomes in chronic pain, and then in acute
Wow.
pain, we saw a reduction in the utility of morphine milligrams equivalents. So really
Hmm.
showcasing that a pharmacogenetic guided approach, you're using less potent opioids essentially.
Right. Because if they don't need as strong as a dose, don't give it to them. Only give them exactly what they need.
Yeah, so for pain medications specifically, there are certain medications that have to be turned on in the body by your genetics. And
Oh.
so in the case where we know somebody can turn on that drug, we actually recommend one of the lower potency medication to try and just overall decrease the usage of opioid medications.
So what do you mean, like your body? This is sorry, so fascinating. So what do you mean your body has to turn it on? So there are certain drugs that could be given to someone. Like I could take a drug and my body could say, like, nope, I'm not going to even allow that to activate.
Yeah, exactly. So we call those prodrugs. So certain medications, you take them in pill form. They go through, your
Right.
GI tract. They get to your liver, and in your liver is where they meet those drug metabolizing enzymes. So
Okay.
some drugs, those enzymes get rid of them. They break down the drug so that way your body can then clear them. Other drugs, when you take them in pill form, are not on. They're not active, and they don't get turned on until they get to the liver. They meet those enzymes, and the enzymes actually turn the medication on, and then they can go throughout the body and do their job. So opioids are one example of those medications that you actually have to have normal or functioning enzymes in your body for that drug to work. Clopidogrel or Plavix is another drug that after having a heart attack is very commonly prescribed. And you need this enzyme in the body to make that drug work.
Oh my goodness, that is so crazy. Okay, so another question I have from this is when you're looking at if this is effective or not, are you also trying to determine if it helps it become effective faster? So, with like the chronic pain issues and all, that
Mm-hmm.
because you can look at it in advance and say this will be an effective medicine for them, that they should start to see results faster?
Not necessarily with pain medications, and not there are some that it depends on the mechanism of the drug. So if a lot of the relationships that we're talking about with pharmacogenetics have to do with the pharmacokinetics of the medication. So if the drug depends on like the amount of drug in the body to get to the time faster, then that could
Mm-hmm.
be an approach. But really, a lot of times we're just thinking about clearing the medication more
Mm-hmm.
quickly or more slowly, or not being able to turn on the medication for it to work at all. So, in the case of medications that need to be turned on in the body by these enzymes, if you don't have that enzyme because of a genetic variation, we would say avoid the drug because you're never going to have enough enzyme in the body to turn that medication
Wow.
on. Versus if you have enzymes that work really quickly for a drug that has to be turned off by the liver, it's going to get out of your body more quickly. And then in that case, we might recommend a dose increase or an alternative drug. It just depends on the specific drug and how it
That is
works.
so amazing. Like, I can see so many ways in the future if this becomes like a normal thing, not only in like day to day, every individual's life working with their their personal physicians, but with clinical research that, because I know there are a lot of times when they run trials, I've seen where they're using a drug that's already been approved and on the market, like in conjunction with what they're testing, or they're doing another variation of it, right? Or something like that. And if they know some of this stuff in advance and could test this with patients to know, are they going to have a lot more success and can get the, what do I want to say, like their selection pool to the correct ones, and maybe not have to start with just the normal healthy individual beginning phase. Like they can almost like kind of skip. That is so amazing. I can see why you're fascinated by this.
Yeah, it's definitely an area of my passion. And just to expand on your point too, there are already several different drugs where in clinical trials when we're prescribing drugs, we go based on the package label.
Right.
And so there's already several different drugs that have pharmacogenomics information in the label already. So when you're thinking about
Right.
the standard of care, you already have that information available for several different medications, and that's a great starting point for our clinical trials as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So like, let's say myself, like if I was interested in going about this process, how would I even like approach this with my doctor, do you think?
Great question. You can start just by asking your doctor, have you heard of pharmacogenetic testing? Do you think this could be something that could help me? I heard about it to guide, whatever the medication is that you heard about it for, and see what they think. Certainly, if you're on a medication that you're responding well to and you're tolerating, then your doctor might not think that it's the best time to test you if you're doing well. But certainly a great time to get tested is when switching or you're considering a switch. And obviously that's going to be a conversation between an individual and their doctor. But just don't hesitate to bring that up to your doctor. Certain doctors know more about this test in this field than others. And your doctor can certainly facilitate ordering, or there are other laboratories available throughout the nation that you can facilitate, initiate testing on your own. They all do have to be ordered by a doctor. So they might either have their own internal doctor or request that your doctor send in a referral.
Yeah.
But it depends on the doctor. Some doctors are really, really excited about the test. They use it all the time. Some are happy to order the test, but may not know exactly how to use it. And some others might be against it because they don't feel like the evidence is there yet. And certainly we're here as really to help not only patients, but also help providers to understand where the evidence is for these tests and how to use it, because there are definitely a lot of different gene tests available, and not all of them do have enough evidence that should be integrated into clinical practice. So that's one area that we really use here at UF is making sure that we're providing recommendations on genes that truly have a high level of evidence to be implemented into clinical practice.
Well, that's awesome. So even our physicians can go to you and get support to learn how this works. Or if they had a patient just walk in the door, like, here's a test I decided to take all on my own, that they can be like, I'm not quite sure the best way to interpret this. So they could reach out to you for your expertise.
Exactly. Yeah. So our online, we have a lot of resources for physicians on our website. We take referrals directly from physicians as well. And that scenario that you described of a patient bringing in their own results, they often do that. And they're often about 20 to 30 pages long report that providers just don't have the time to really interpret and understand it, especially if they're not familiar with it. And so we help to take that 30-page report and boil it down to very personalized recommendations for that provider, what to do for their patient.
This is so cool. I know that one of the conversations I had with a recent guest was, on patient advocacy and like advocacy in general, that we should like advocate for ourselves. And I know like it was several years ago. I had some form of a test like this. I don't think it was anywhere near as like extensive as it sounds like the one you're talking about. So like I'm definitely interested in looking into this myself, because for myself, as an advocate and everything. But I know one thing I learned from it that was very fascinating was that, because I've never had surgery, and I actually learned that if I were to go under anesthesia, that I would metabolize it faster than what would be considered like average. And I'm like, so glad I found that out in case it ever happens. Because honestly, it kind of terrifies me to think of going into surgery and waking up in the middle of it. Like that is so crazy. But I'm so for patient advocacy. So I love that they have the option of reaching out to company like yours directly, as well as working with their providers. And I really hope that providers are become more, when new things enter the industry, everyone's always a little hesitant, but I hope they become more open to this, because it's so amazing to think that you can read some things about my genes and say like, there's no point in even trying that depression medicine, or you're going to metabolize this so fast, we need to give you X dose. Like, it's beyond fascinating to me.
Absolutely. And really, it's just another tool for providers.
Right.
It's something else, another piece of information, another piece of
Right.
lab work. It might not solve the patient all of the answers or all of the problems that the patient might be experiencing, but it at least provides a little bit more information and can
Right.
kind of help solve that puzzle of maybe why the patient's not responding. Because there could be several different factors, but it's just something else that providers can use to help prescribe and personalize medications for their patients.
That's so neat. And now, are you able to tell us, because again, I know you always have to keep confidentiality in mind, have you had any like really cool stories with patients or an individual where this, like by doing this, it just really helped them or something?
Great question. We don't currently routinely follow up on our patients. Unfortunately, it
Okay.
is more of just like a one-time
Yeah.
visit and a one-time test. We always encourage our patients that, hey, you can reach back out. And
Yeah.
so I haven't had any patients recently let us know that it's been in life-changing, but certainly during the visit, people
Yeah.
are fascinated. It
Yeah.
really, I've definitely had several different patients that I can encounter where they told me their past medication response, and then we reviewed their results, and it just really aligned. And it just
Oh,
makes the
that's cool.
patient feel validated, like, oh my
Right.
gosh, I've had this much trouble with these medications. No one's understood why. This has been so frustrating. And so having like a reason for that is really validating and I think helpful for patients, and they just have found it very interesting.
That
Um,
is so cool.
I have heard from a doctor on a few patients kind of here and there that their patients
Yeah.
are doing really well and they were really grateful for this service, but not
Yeah.
anyone that I specifically like talked to after the visit.
It still just amazes me. Our bodies and the way this works, like, because it all comes down to our liver and an enzyme in our liver that
Mm-hmm.
determines everything, if these drugs are going to work or not. So what happens if maybe this is you've no idea, that's totally out of left field, but what happens to like people who've had like liver transplants and all?
That Yeah, that's a great question. So that's a population that we actually usually exclude um, because of these enzymes are typically located in the liver. So
Hmm.
this pharmacogenetic testing can be used for a medication commonly used after transplant, but it's
Hmm.
really more so for patients any organ transplant except for the liver, unless you know the donor and the recipient's genotype. So
Oh,
if you know the genetics of the donated liver, then you could potentially still use this information.
Yeah.
But generally, if we come across anyone who's had a liver transplant and then they're getting the testing afterwards, we can't necessarily use them with confidence. There's some
Yeah.
evidence that it's an area that's currently being studied and it's really interesting,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
think we'll learn more and kind of learning about assimilation, over time, maybe so much time after transplant, but you would really need to know the donor's genotype to truly be able to use this information.
That's so interesting, yeah, to think of it because someone who maybe their liver before would not activate something could have the liver from someone else put in them who would, and suddenly their body can activate this stuff. But then over
Mm-hmm.
time, would that liver adapt to this body enough that it reverts to what the original body would do? Like, it's
Right,
so
exactly.
mind-boggling.
And you oftentimes the test can be done either blood or a cheek. And so you could get different results too. So like your cheeks might
Oh,
not fully pick up on like more of the circulating DNA that might have been come from the donor. And then you also express these enzymes in like your gut, your skin too. So there are other places besides just the liver, but the liver is like where we think about it the most with the
yeah.
relationship to medications. But yeah, there could be differences in testing with people who underwent transplant.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. So do you have any specific like hopes in the future of where this is going to go?
Um, I just really want everyone to get testing. It's a lifelong result. So, in my biased opinion, I think everybody should get preemptive panel-based testing up front before you are prescribed medications. So that way you have that information when your doctor wants to use it. So often, I mean, we have a relatively quick turnaround time with the lab that we use. But even a week might not be fast enough because really when the provider is going to order the test is when they want those results. And if it were
Mhm.
already available preemptively, then the patient would already have those results available. And so instead of the provider going, it'd be nice to have genetics in this scenario to help guide my prescribing decisions, let me go ahead and order it, they could just say, oh, let me just review it and we'll take that into consideration right now versus having to get the test, make the patient wait, potentially wait on changing medications or just trying a different medication and then changing it later. So my hope is
Your
pharmacogenetic
hope is
testing for
everyone does
all
it.
up front.
So I guess I could see listeners having this question, like the affordability of it. Is it something that insurances cover? If not, is it something that's realistically affordable for the everyday person?
Great question. So it is a variable currently. The
Hmm.
landscape continues to change as more evidence and science emerges.
Yeah.
So right now, like our service here, MyRx, we have two parts to our service: the pharmacogenetic test itself, and then the actual interpretation and consult piece.
Right.
So
Okay.
as pharmacists, we cannot bill for our time in Florida in our current model that we have set up.
Oh,
So the
interesting.
interpretation and consult piece is a cash price billed directly to patients, but the test can be billed to insurance. So
Okay.
if and that's the common that a lot of these tests can be billed to insurance, and insurance coverage is variable. We looked in the past up until from 2019, I believe our data started from 2020, the end of 2022, and we
Hmm.
saw about 75% of the time the test was being paid for from insurance, which we were really happy about that.
Wow.
It's since been variable and it just really depends on like why the test is being ordered. I said I really wish everyone could get preemptive testing. Insurance companies don't like preemptive testing. To
Yeah.
bill for it, you
Shocker.
really need a reason. Yes. They like more reactive reasoning. So I've seen pretty good coverage for like depression and anxiety,
Yeah.
post heart
Yeah.
attack as well. Other reasons have there's really no rhyme or reason. Sometimes they get paid for, sometimes they don't. And certain labs will kind of give their maximum price. So
like if your
typically
insurance
now,
doesn't cover it, it's up.
mhm,
Oh, this is the most we would charge you.
exactly. And I've seen tests anywhere from like the $300 to $600 range. So depending on your viewpoint, that some would say that's
Yes.
affordable, some would say that that's not affordable.
Right.
Um, in Florida this month, we actually just had new legislation come through
Oh.
that's going to require coverage for biomarker testing, which
Oh.
pharmacogenetics falls into place for. And I want to say there's about 17 states right now that have some degree of legislation. Like we are looks like maybe about 14 or so have been passed. So that's since 2021. But it's coming more and more to different states. So different states have different variety of either views on this biomarker bill. Some
Yeah.
have full coverage. So like California, I think was the most recent state to say we're fully covering biomarker tests, which then if you read the wording, it should include pharmacogenetics and pharmacogenomic testing. I think it remains to be seen if it truly does translate to pharmacogenomic testing. If you read the wording, it should apply, but it's definitely something newer, and the pharmacogenomics community is super excited about it because if
Yeah.
we're requiring coverage, then commercial payers are going to start covering it as well, and that's just going to make it more affordable and accessible to patients.
Right. So pretty much, if listeners are interested, they should probably look into their insurance, maybe call their insurance to find out if it's covered and in what situations. And then they could always have those conversations with their doctors, or even reach out and maybe find some facilities like MyRx if they're lucky enough to be in Florida. And what was the other one?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. So, and more to come, more to come. So that, I mean, it just amazes me how I keep saying that, but it does. It's just, it's mind blowing how this works, and it's not it's not just in this, it's in other things. Like when you find out how, the nerves up in your shoulder could actually be affected by something in your leg or whatever. It's that kind of thing. It's the way this breaks it down. What else? I'm trying to think of some additional questions because I feel like I've been throwing everything out you as it's been coming to me. But what else do you think is really good for listeners to know about pharmacogenomics in general, or how this could really help clinical trials in the future if anyone out there is part of trials where they might be able to implement this?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think we really hit a lot of the points home. There are several different resources out there for consumers. So on our website at ufhealth.org/MyRx, we have a patient video available that helps
Oh,
explain what pharmacogenomics is. The VA has just widely implemented pharmacogenomics across the country. They've got some
oh
really
wow.
great resources as well and they have a really nice patient video as well. So the resources are out there, and certainly bring up this conversation with your provider if you're trying to figure out if this test could help you. They're obviously going to know you best and know the medications best. And certainly you could reach out to your pharmacist. So, I mean, even your pharmacist that's dispensing your medications in your community, they're going to know your medications, and they could also provide some insight if this test could impact those medications, because it's not all medications. Certainly, the most common are ones used for depression and anxiety, for pain, heart health, and heartburn or stomach ulcers. Those are really the most common areas that we see. Um, but it's a test that's been around for a long time, and we're trying to continue to help build the evidence to become the standard of care. So I
Yes.
would love to see more trials looking at pharmacogenetics
Yes.
as well, and really just showing that it can improve and improve patient reported outcomes. I think is going to be key, but we know that there's that relationship exists. So
Yes.
it's available clinically, and it's just another tool that you can use in your pocket. So why not use it?
Well, and are you, in your field of study, are you able to take the information? So, they're ongoing trials, and obviously, once they're done and the information's released from these trials, are you able to take? Sorry, there's a fly. Are you able to take the information from these trials, whether they're successful or not, and use that information to help you as you grow your area of expertise?
Um, Not me personally, but
Right.
yes,
Okay.
there are certainly large clinical trials that have been done that routinely collect blood and other samples. So a lot of trials now do routinely collect blood and genetic
Mm-hmm.
results. So as we know, oh, this drug actually has a genetic implication. Let's look at this trial. So there are several different examples of larger clinical trials that then will publish sub studies with
Yeah.
people's genetic information and showing how it's different in individuals with genetic variations, which are quite common.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I've seen on some trials that I've worked on where, in addition to like the informed consent form, they'll have an additional form for some type of a sub study or being able to maintain, like they'll collect something from them, whether it's blood or something, and be able to actually hold on to that for future things. Like they actually have a form where they'll get release from patients if they want to participate in
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a biobank is probably what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is very common. And yes, we actually have a biobank here at University of Florida College of Pharmacy, where we do have an additional consent where patients, part of our large trials, will undergo an additional consent to store that blood. And then it's linked to their information in their medical records. So you could do studies down the line with new discoveries. So yes, I guess I could down the line do some of that type of research as well. And that's really nice because it could be, maybe genes that we don't know about yet. So let's
Yeah.
store it and then have that information. And then as we discover new genes, like for example, drug receptors in like pain or
Mm,
depression, we could
hmm.
then have that information, have a population who was treated for depression or pain, and then you can go ahead and study that new discovery of gene to see is there an association in this population as well.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love it. And, I really liked what you mentioned earlier about the pharmacist, like the pharmacist that you see at wherever you get your medication on a consistent basis. I actually did have a situation where the pharmacist helped me. It's interesting that it took as long as it did for a pharmacist to say something, but like in my family, migraines like
Mhm.
are genetic. Like we get horrible migraines, and I'd been having a lot, and I was even on several different medications trying to help with the migraines. And at one point, when I was picking up my medicine, the pharmacist who was giving it to me was like, I noticed that you take this migraine medicine, but this birth control pill that you're on actually causes migraines. And I'm like, why was this never brought up to me before? So like I took myself off the birth control. I haven't been on it since. And my migraines, like now pretty much it's related to the weather.
Oh
Like for the
wow.
most part I don't have it, but it's like it was a pharmacist who actually brought that up, which is crazy because I'd been to several doctors throughout the years, and not a single one of them was ever like, maybe we should, that's a common side effect of this birth control, maybe we should take you
Mhm.
off that. Like,
Yeah,
so
that's just not the forefront of what
yeah,
prescribers are thinking about. And that's definitely a
yeah,
value added of the pharmacist who's really,
yeah,
that's where our training comes in, is we're really
right,
medication first focused.
yeah,
That's really
oh
great to
yeah,
have that
people,
pharmacist.
I really feel like individuals should really listen to pharmacists, because pharmacists really, they understand the drugs so well.
Hmm.
That is their expertise. That's what the pharmacist is there for. So, oh my gosh. Well, this has been amazing and fascinating. Before we wrap up, I want to let our listeners know where they can reach you if they want to find out more information or be in touch or even possibly order one of these amazing tests.
Absolutely. The best way to contact me is looking to our clinical website, which is ufhealth.org/MyRx. We can be reached via email or phone. If you dial our phone number, you'll get someone on our small clinical team that can help answer questions about pharmacogenomics and can help facilitate setting you up with our service if you're in the state of Florida or New Jersey. And all that contact information can be found on our website.
Well, that's amazing. And I'll make sure it's all in the show notes as well. But thank you again, Emily, so much for your time and talking to us about this, because at the end of the day, this is what clinical research is doing. It's determining if these drugs are going to work with our bodies. And so it's amazing for all of us to know for our everyday use. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and I'm so excited about all the clinical research in all the different areas. It's what we really need to be able to allow me to do my everyday job and making patients' lives better.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
This brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to extend my sincere thanks to our guest for sharing their inspiring journey. If you'd like to connect with them, you can find their contact information in the show notes. I also want to express my gratitude to you for joining us on this exploration of the clinical research industry. I hope you found today's episode insightful. If so, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It truly helps us reach more listeners. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments about the show, feel free to email me at podcast@iceconsultingllc.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to having you joining us on our next episode of Heart of the Trial.